when I was asking you, I said we have stuff in common, but it is different for actors. I mean, in some ways, every time I do a job, you're open to criticism from critics or people or bloggers, whatever. But I actually feel the internal pressure from your industry, other doctors, academics, is more brutal. In fact, I like if I do a job, Leonardo DiCaprio doesn't write an op-ed and go, you know what, this guy is the worst. He's like your fellow actors might bitch about you behind closed doors, but your fellow actors are not getting out there trashing you. Whereas I think that's a real thing. Tell me if I'm wrong, but in the medical industry, it's
Yeah, but
much tougher. And I'm
I
sure
think it's tougher for
sharing your
you.
feelings,
I think it's tougher for
there would
you.
be people.
No, you're on a
Really?
much bigger stage. You're on a much bigger stage, and you. I don't think in the history of you. What do you what performance are you most proud of on the screen?
Hmm. There's elements of the fountain. It's I'm going to say elements. I'm super proud of Les Mis. That was some really frightening stuff for me and elemental stuff. Logan,
Mm.
because I knew that was a 17-year journey to get to that. Um, there are moments in Prisoners, in um, moments in The Prestige, the first movie I ever did, which no one has ever seen, called Erskine Kings, which we shot in 3 weeks. First time I did a movie. I actually am proud of a lot of stuff in The Front Runner,
Mm.
which, it didn't come and go, but it didn't quite land in the way I guess we all hoped. Um, it's moments. I very rarely kind of come away from a film without criticism, personal criticism.
That's my point, right? Is there's no matter how great a job you do, there's always someone given the stage you're on that's going to say something that is it represents a total lack of understanding of what actually took place. And
Hmm.
um so in that sense, I think the criticism that an actor or an athlete, a professional athlete, or a politician, and look, in our culture today, politician's a dirty word, but I got to believe there are some of them that are still good. and
Of course.
so think about a job where a 60% approval rating is amazing. Like that, if you're a politician, a 60% approval rating means you're exceptional, and that means 40% of people can't stand you. Speaking of approval ratings, I love this
Yeah.
statistic. These Q ratings, right? Do
Yeah,
you know
right.
that you
Yeah.
have the highest Q rating in Australia? Your Q rating, which is a measure of popularity and likability, is 99%. And I think the next person after you is 67%.
Yeah, a friend of mine who runs Foxtel, which is like a big sort of cable network in Australia. And he did come from marketing originally in PR, but anyway, he rang me and he told me this. Why did he tell me? I think I was going to do something like a commercial for something. He goes, and so the Q rating is more around if you're going to endorse a product.
Yeah. How much do you trust this person? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And he rang me and he said, dude, for the last 8 years, you've been the number one guy by such a long way. And he said, but here's the thing. I know you're going to hear that. And all you're going to think is, what? There's 1% who don't like me. What do I have to do to get the 1%? That's exhausting. That's probably and I laugh my head off. And there's certainly an element of truth to
Well,
that.
that's why you absolutely could never go into politics.
The worst. When I did the front runner, people said, "Oh, you want to go into politics?" I said, "No." In fact, when I said to my
Did you
dad,
spend time
who's
with Gary Hart, by the way, in prep
oh
for
yeah,
that movie? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I went and spent time with him. And let me just before I forget, when I told my dad I was going to go and study acting, and I sort of wanted his blessing. My dad never gave advice
Hmm.
about. There was, he always thought it's your choice. And then after I make a decision, he'd let me know what he thought, which was super frustrating at the time. But now I think incredibly wise and disciplined. But I said I'm getting into acting. He goes, I definitely think you have the talent, but I think you're too thin-skinned. That was his comment to me. So I've always kept that, and actually it was helpful to me. I don't read reviews.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get the temperature of the water. Someone say, what's the temperature here? What's the basic idea? But once I start reading, particularly when you're doing stage, it gets into your head. And actually, a compliment is sometimes worse than a negative. A negative can fire you up. Oh yeah, I'll show them. Oh yeah, really? You don't think I don't? But a positive, like, it can kill you.
But that's so there's sort of different, right? There's the review for on screen where you can't do anything about it. The work is done, it's out
Right.
there. Then there's the review on stage where you're going out night after night after night. So do you think about those types of reviews differently?
Totally. So I really don't look at the reviews for on stage. Again, I'll just try and find the thing because, like, for example, I did a show called The Boy from Oz. It was back in 2003. We did not get well reviewed. I did not read any reviews, but my feeling on opening night, being on stage, was like, man, this is landing. Like, this connects with people. I can feel it's great. So I remember we got together on the next night we were back on, and we were in a circle, and our producers came and they did one of those, don't worry, we committed to the show. And I remember looking around going,
Uh-oh.
what's going on? How bad was it? And it turned out it was not great. And so in theater, particularly in New York, particularly back then, if you didn't get a review from the New York Times, it could kill your show, because a lot of the other reviewers followed that. Most people look at the New York Times, and it depends. Ticket sales depend on that.
Mm.
So on movies, it's not always dependent on that. So anyway, we ended up, but I was like, no, I feel this connects. I really feel it connects. And we ended up being kind of a massive hit. And it did actually, I could feel people came back and back and back. One woman saw it 200 times
Wow.
out of 400 shows that I did. It was people just, I could feel, and by the end, we were like, you couldn't get a ticket. So in that way, I'm kind of glad I didn't read those reviews, because I knew no one knows better than me and all those other actors, not even the director. I know when it's landing, a bit like a comedian on stage, and you know if something is landing or not. And someone could write a review, and it will. But film is different. Film, you're removed from it. You're not in the editing process unless you're part of that or directing it, and you never really know how it's going to land. And I do actually now think I've sort of grown up a little bit and think it's worthwhile reading really good reviewers to see what their take is on it. But I think I was always basically scared to read, what the hell is this guy doing on the screen? Like, he's not that good. I don't understand it. Blah blah blah. And that something like that would just bring me to my knees. That's what always scared me, I think.
Do you I mean so does Deb have the same sort of relationship, like when you are doing something or when she is doing something, can you not read for each other? I mean, is it harder to see your spouse going through something that you deem unfair, and then do you have sort of an agreement that says,
Oh
look,
yeah.
you can read these reviews, but I don't want you to share with me the nitty-gritty of it. You can give me the gestalt if it's productive for me. Like how do you navigate that?
That's exactly how it works. So, I remember I did a one man show here on Broadway, and Deb came down to me. She goes, I've read them all and they're amazing. And I know you don't want to read them, but you have to read this. It's in the New York Times and you need to read it. So I read it, and I was like, Deb, I don't think this is a great review. She goes, what are you talking about? It's amazing. And I said, I don't think so. There was a line in there that I remembered to this day. Um, all Hugh Jackman asks of his audience is that you love him, loving you, loving him. And I kind of went, hey, what? But in my heart, I knew that was like, this is kind of bullshit. He's really, he wants you to think that he's really there for you, but I'm not sure he is. It stuck with me to this day. I remember going bright red reading it, going, is that it? Am I? Anyway, and Deb was like, oh my God, I'll never give it to you again. But I kind of, in a way, what I didn't want to hear, it might have been a throwaway line from the review. I don't know, but but ultimately, I think it helped me, because it made me go, all right, really look at yourself. Is that the real me? Because I'm doing a one man show. It's like elements of my life.
Hmm.
How much am I manipulating that to show you what the version of me I want you to see? Which is, I guess, what that line is about. And how much of it is actually me? And that's a work in progress for all of us. I like if I do that show now, I would say I'm more authentic than I was 10 years ago. But it's a good question. Like, and Deb is like a lioness. Like, I mean, she'll just want to lop someone's head off if they give me a bad review. Like she's very, very protective. I'm sure Jill is the same for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, Jill, well, it's funny. So Jill really has enormous disdain for social media, which is really the place where people are going to attack you the most.
Right.
For example, recently I put out a number of podcasts that dealt with vaccines, vaccine science, and sort of a lot of the misinformation around this. And not surprisingly, you're going to get a very small vocal minority of people who are just going to attack you over this kind of stuff, and do so in a very personal way. Not almost it's almost impossible for these people to say, this is your interesting take on the science, but have you ever considered such and such? No. It's usually like, you're in the pockets of pharma. You're an idiot. Literally, I had one person compare me to Adolf Hitler, and say that what you're doing is propagating so much lies that are going to hurt so many people that, this is like Hitler killing Jews. So when you have this type of vitriol coming at you, Jill's view is, why do you even do this? Like, why in the world do you do this? Why would you ever, have a single account on social media that even gives people an opportunity to comment?
What's your answer?
It's that, look, I don't really look at these things that much. Frankly, it's very rare that I look at them, and it's even rarer that I would respond. Maybe once every 6 months, I have a lapse in judgment and I'll actually respond to someone like that, trying to clarify something. And I'm 0 for 20 on ever changing anybody's mind who's in that stage. So you'd think after like the first 10, I would have learned, like, when someone comes at you with that, like, that you can't talk rationally with them. Joe Rogan gave me really, really great advice a few months ago after a particularly awful attack. He said, because I said, Joe, how do you cope with this? Like, how in the world do you, because you must be, you're such a polarizing figure. And he just said, post and ghost, post and ghost. Whenever he puts something up, he never, ever, ever looks at a single comment. So, in some ways, that's our analog, I think.
Yeah. But in the end, I guess you're doing it because I can't imagine do you care about those people who are saying you're Adolf Hitler? It's like,
no,
it's
I mean,
so...
when someone says something so ridiculous, that doesn't faze me. I think what does bother me, though, truthfully, is that I know that a lot of the people who have really warped views about science will suffer for those views. Like, science is a hard topic, and I think scientists have not always done a good job explaining it. And I think that people do sometimes pay a price for this. And so I think in some ways I have empathy for people who are, I think, being misled. And obviously I have, incredible empathy for parents, of kids with autism who think, this vaccine did this to my child, even though there's not a shred of evidence to suggest that. But I understand. Of course you want to have someone to blame for this. And so I think, if anything, I just want to be able to offer those people, some hope that says, hey, you didn't do this to your child. And so that's part of what I think makes me a bit sad.
I think that's why your book is a bit of a game changer for me, in that it's incredibly humanizing. I think a lot of people feel with medical stuff or with doctors, they want confidence, right? They want to feel like what they're getting is the right answer, because I don't know. I haven't done any science. I don't know. Should I take this pill or that pill? So you want that confidence, but sometimes that can come across as arrogance, I guess, from some doctors, and then people want to question it and lump it in with some kind of government conspiracy. I don't really understand that, but your book, I think, will go a long way to just humanizing it and saying, hey, I can be wrong, by the way, and I've been wrong, and here's how I've been wrong, and here's what I've learned from it. But, I've done a lot of work on this, and this is the way forward.
This podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content on this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Finally, I take conflicts of interest very seriously. For all of my disclosures and the companies I invest in or advise, please visit peteratiamd.com/about, where I keep an up-to-date and active list of such companies.